Hi all. I just want to record you this quick video to explain a concept that not a lot of people know about, and we were a little unsure about exactly how it would work ourselves until the government have recently clarified one or two things around CBILS and bounce back loans. And that concept is that there's a real issue if you're taking out a CBILS or bounce back loan and you're also wanting to make a claim under the SME R&D scheme. Now, all of you watching this video, if you are making R&D claims, you'll be making them under the SME scheme, and I'll explain in a minute why that's important. So, what is the issue? The issue is that the government rules state that you are only allowed state aid support or one type of state aid support for any projects that you do under R&D. And R&D tax credits is one form of state aid, and the government have now confirmed that CBILS and bounce back loans are another form of state aid. So that means you can't have both forms of state aid supporting one project. So if you've claimed in the past R&D tax credits for a particular project, and that project is now ongoing into year 2 or year 3, you can't borrow money under bounce back or CBILS and continue to support that project. Bit of an issue there. I'll explain how that works in practice in a minute. Similarly, if you are in the first year of a project and therefore haven't yet claimed any SME R&D tax credits, you get a loan which then funds the work on that project, you can't then claim the SME R&D tax credits on that project. So you can't have both on the same project, which could cause a few issues for a few people, might not. So does that mean if you have a loan, you can't claim any R&D tax credits at all? No. What it means is instead of claiming on the SME scheme like you will do now, where you get 25 to 33p back for every pound of qualifying expenditure that you've got, you'd actually be pushed into something called the RDEX scheme. And the RDEX scheme is generally what large companies use. And the benefit that you get back from that is a lot smaller. It's only 13p. So it's probably about half of the benefit that you're currently getting back on R&D you would get back if you were using a loan to support a project. Probably a little bit confused at the minute, so let me just show you some examples and I'll walk you through, and hopefully this will make it clear as to exactly how this works. So let's just have a look at a very simple little company. This company spends £100,000 a year. £10,000 of it is non-R&D type work, so admin type support, but they spend £90,000 a year on R&D work. So they decide to go out and get a £50,000 bounce back loan. What happens then is they may be using some of that loan to fund their non-R&D expenditure, but by the very nature, if they've only got £10,000 worth of non-R&D, they must be using some of that loan to fund R&D expenditure. So in this case, they've used £10,000 to fund all their admin costs, and then they're using the remaining £40,000 to support a project which is an R&D project. What that means is that entire £90,000 R&D project is now excluded from the SME R&D scheme. So that entire project would now have to be claimed under the RDEX scheme rather than the SME scheme. So they'd only get half the benefit back for doing so. And it's not only the amount that you've got the loan on the project, it's the entire value of the project. So even a £1,000 loan on a £1 million project would throw that entire £1 million project into the RDEX scheme and out of the SME scheme. So generally, we don't have companies who look like that. That just explains it in very simple terms. But we might have a company who's got a small amount of admin expenditure and then, let's say, 3 big R&D projects on the go at any one time. What's the worst thing they could do? Well, the worst thing they could do is borrow that 50,000 and use it to fund a bit of each of the projects that they're working on. And they might be using a bit of it on each project because they've got one person working over 3 projects. potentially, or 2 people working over 3 projects. If they do that, the problem they've got then is they've now excluded every single one of their projects from the SME scheme and pushed them all into the RDEC scheme. So they're only going to be able to claim half the amount back for every single project that they do. So what do we need to think about? Well, first thing, and a better scenario than that, would be to make sure that any funding we borrow only funds one or a small number of the R&D projects that we've got on the go. So in this case, if we'd have used different people on different projects or used the money in a different way that we borrowed, and therefore could show that it all just supported one project, then the other 2 projects that we've got going both fall into the SME scheme, and there's only that middle project that would have to be claimed under the RDEC scheme. Bit complicated, but it means that the benefit that you get back is bigger. Now, the ideal is, and you might be sat there thinking, oh, I've got a BBL or I've got a CBILS, and that could mean absolute disaster for me. The reality is, with a lot of businesses who are in the R&D scheme, we don't just have £10,000 worth of non-R&D. Probably the majority, or at least a large proportion of our spend in our companies are non-R&D expenditure. So if we're actually looking in a position where we've got, let's say, £60,000 worth of non-R&D expenditure, and we could show that we've used that loan to support that type of expenditure and not R&D, then we can leave all of our projects in the R&D SME framework. So this is the ideal that we're wanting to look at over the next 12 months. So if you've got a bounce back or a CBILS and you're thinking of claiming R&D, you've got some R&D projects in the next 12 months, this is the type of scenario that we want to see, or be as sure as we can that we can produce, so that we keep all of your projects within the SME R&D framework. So that hopefully just explains, if you read anything or see anything about the way that CBILS interacts with R&D, hopefully that explains exactly how it works. Yes, it's a lot more complicated than that, but that just gives you a flavour for how the framework will work.